Hey y'all, welcome to Peyton Energetics. I'm Peyton, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about the star races, and in particular, about our oldest galactic ancestors, the Lyrins. So, as y'all know, as we crossed into 2023, we've officially entered the window for open contact. And what that means, in case that is a new concept to you, is that the guides say that they have been given permission to start interacting with us here on Earth. And when we talk about open contact, we're not talking about channeling or visiting our star family in the astral or in the dream state. The guides are talking about actual physical contact with us. So we have now entered the window for that possibility. And some members of our star family are predicting a major contact event in the next 2 or so years. So with that in mind, the guides thought it was a good idea for us to start talking about the star races. Now, in the spiritual community, there are certain star races that we're pretty familiar with, right? We have all heard of the Pleiadians. We're pretty familiar with the Sirians. We know a bit about the Arcturians and the Orions, but the guides are starting to share information about some of the star races we're not so familiar with. Because if we are about to be reintegrated into our galactic family, the guides thought we should start to meet the relatives. And as you guys know, I'm a Pleiadian channel, and my guide team is primarily Pleiadian and Sirian. So when I share these little updates with you, it is generally coming from a Pleiadian perspective. So the Pleiadians wanted to talk to us a little bit about one of the more prominent members of our star family today, and that is the Lyrans. Now, you've probably heard of the Lyrans, may know generally who they are, what their role is in galactic history. But today the guides wanted to take us on a deeper exploration of the Lyrans, because the Lyrans kind of kicked off the whole human game in the galaxy. According to our galactic history, human consciousness started in the Lyran star system. So today the guides are going to talk to us a little bit about who the Lyrans were, what their role was in galactic history, and what their civilization was like, what the actual Lyrans themselves were like, to help us get a sense of our oldest galactic ancestors, where this whole human game started. So when the guides talk to us about how human form spread throughout the galaxy, they trace this story back to the Lyran star system. So this is a star system that many of us are familiar with. You probably know about the brightest star in that star system, which is known as Vega. And the guides tell us that this is where human consciousness was birthed into the galaxy. This is the story of our galactic history. So as the story goes, human form entered our galaxy through the Lyran star system. And what kicked all of this off, according to the Pleiadians, was that our galaxy was seeded by two key races. One was the feline beings, and the other was the avian beings. So according to our galactic history, the feline beings were the actual creators of humanoid form in the galaxy. According to the guides, when the felines entered the galaxy, they did so in what we know of as etheric form. So they weren't physicalized beings at that point. But what they did was inhabit or move into the Lyran star system and begin to drop themselves down in density to start to take on more and more of a physical form. And the guides say that the Lyrans, as they became more physical, then created what we know as modern humanoid form in the galaxy by combining their DNA with that of a primate species in the Lyran system to eventually create the first prototype of humanoid form in the galaxy. And according to our galactic history, there are two main strains of human form that originated from the Lyran star system. One is what we think of as the traditional Lyrins. And there was also a sister civilization coming from the Vegan star system. So the guides say that there were two basic strains of humanoid form that kicked off the entire humanoid experience in our galaxy, and all of it stemmed from the Lyran star system. Now, why did things start in the Lyran star system? Why there, of all the places in the galaxy? Well, according to the guides, the reason for that was because there were so many beautiful paradise-like planets in the Lyran system. And the other reason was because the Lyran star system is said to be very close to galactic center. So those are the two reasons that the guides give us for why the Lyran star system was where this entire show started. It was location, location, location. So according to galactic history, humanoid form started from these two strains or races of humanoid form from the Lyran system. So the Lyrins and the Vegans were where everything started. Now, in the early days, life went on for a long time as the Lyrins and Vegans evolved very slowly. They were the only human game in the galaxy, and they had no one to look to learn from or to help them in their development. They had their squabbles and their differences because they were very different races fundamentally. So according to the guides, the original Lyrans were known very much for being more of a father god consciousness, so much more action-oriented. And the Vegans, who were known for their blue skin, were much more spiritually oriented. So the guides sometimes describe the Vegans as coming from mother god consciousness. So the Lyrins and the Vegans coexisted for a long time, having their differences, coming from very different ideologies. So what happened to spread human form throughout the galaxy? Well, unfortunately, it was not a happy story. What ultimately spread human form throughout the galaxy, according to the guides, is that this beautiful paradise system that the Lyrins and Vegans were living in were attacked by the Draconians, the ancient reptilians, in what was known as a devastating galactic war. According to the guides, 3 planets were completely destroyed, and about 50 million beings were killed in these wars. So these wars were absolutely catastrophic. So as a result of the attacks by the reptilians, the Lyrins and the Vegans were forced to flee their home. And what resulted was that they spread throughout the galaxy, settling in many of the star systems that we are now very familiar with, settling in the Sirius system, settling in the Pleiades, settling in Cassiopeia, and also here on Earth. So it was these devastating galactic wars that are said to have driven the Lyrins and the Vegans from their home. Now, as we mentioned, the Lyrins and the Vegans were very different, even though they came from the same star system. So they tended to spread out and separate as a result of these wars, and ended up living and colonizing in different star systems. So as a result of these devastating galactic wars and the sending of the Lyrins and Vegans throughout the galaxy, the guides tell us that most of the races that we are familiar with in our galactic family are descendants from these original Lyran and Vegan colonies. So the guides like to say that all humans have Lyran genetics, because again, according to our galactic history, all human form started with the Lyrins. And a lot of times when we talk about galactic history, we lump the Vegans in with the Lyrins and call them all the Lyrins because they came from the same star system and were really the founders of modern humanoid form. But the Vegans are really deserving of a story of their own, and we will cover that in a future video. So for the purposes of today's story, we will consider the Lyrins and the Vegans to be the Lyrins. Now, the guides like to also note that the Lyrins are what they consider to be the oldest souls in the galaxy, because of course, they are where it all started. Now, let's talk a minute about the physical Lyrins, or what the Lyrins were like when they were in physical form, because the guides like to point out that the Lyrins are no longer in physical form, that they are now mostly existing in the higher realms and dimensions, So when we talk about them as physical beings, we're taking a look back in history. If we were to look at this story from the perspective of linear time, which of course we do as humans, but we have to always keep in mind that we are the only ones who look at this through the lens of linear time. So when the guides tell us about those original Lyran beings, our founders of human form in the galaxy, they say that the Lyrins were known as being very physical beings. So these are beings who loved being in physical bodies. They loved to eat good food and have good drink, and they just loved being in bodies, being physical. So the original Lyrins are known for being very, very active. They love to be on the go, doing things, and they're said to even have loved physical labor, hard physical action. They were all about it. So the Lyrins are one of our few galactic ancestors who really loved to be in physical bodies. They love just the experience of the body. And we see that in so many Lyran starseeds as well. And as you guys know, most starseeds have kind of a dicey relationship with their physical body. Most starseeds aren't super comfortable being physical, but Lyran starseeds are the exception. They tend to be starseeds who share their forefathers' love of the physical. So Lyran starseeds tend to fit very comfortably in physical bodies, to love having a physical body. And you can see all of that coming from the Lyran forefathers. So this is something the original Lyrins were known for, that love of the physical. Now, something else the Lyrins were known for is they were known for being great explorers. So the original Lyrins, of course, the guides like to describe them as being of father god consciousness. So more of the divine masculine energy. And as a result of this, they loved to be active. They were known as master explorers, and they're often described as having what the Pleiadians call a freedom fighter vibe. So they were known for being very strong-willed. Some call it arrogance and dominance. The Lyrins were definitely, that is often associated with them. So that confidence could sometimes tip the scales to being pushy, pushing their will on others. And a little bit of arrogance is often also associated with the original Lyrins. But they were also beings who were very fearless. And the guides like to say that the original Lyrins could often appear to be reckless, to act without thinking, act without considering the consequences. But the guides say that was never the case. They were fearless, but not reckless. So they could have an appearance of not taking things seriously, not considering the consequences, but they always had done so. So the guides say that they could have the appearance of being very rash, but that wasn't actually the case. They were just known for their fearlessness. Now, the original Lyrins who loved being physical so much, according to the guides, were about 12 to 15 feet tall. So we were talking about very, very tall beings by our current human standards, and they were known to be very strong. So very strong in physical body and very strong in personality. And they could, in the eyes of some of the civilizations that later interacted with them, be a bit arrogant, a bit domineering, a bit controlling. Now, something else that the original Lyrins were known for was their love of cats. So these were beings who had very strong connections to the feline energy, which makes sense when you think about it because they were actually created by the original feline beings in the galaxy. So the Lyrins were known for their love of all things cat. They were actually also known to send starseeds to Earth in the form of cats. So cats are often a symbol of the Lyran civilization, and you can see a lot of cat-like traits in the Lyrins that we know of. So very much in the moment, very self-aware, very confident in who they are, not so much caring what anyone else thinks about it. So feline characteristics are very associated with our Lyran forefathers. And the Lyrins were also known for having a very patriarchal society. So this was a more masculine-driven society, and you can certainly see the presence of the divine masculine, or just the masculine energy, as we talk about the personality that is often attributed to the original Lyrins. And some of the negatives that the Lyrins struggled with, some of the things that were battles for them, were, of course, letting that confidence spill over into arrogance, into pushiness, into feeling that they were superior to other beings. So these are some of the criticisms that are often raised about the original Lyrins, is a lack of sensitivity, a lack of equality, and not really putting themselves in the shoes of others. So this was something that our Lyran forefathers were very much known for. And something else that the Lyrins were very much known for was an excellence with living in harmony with their planets. Because as we mentioned at the beginning, the Lyran star system at the time was very filled with paradise-like planets. And the Lyrins were known for living in harmony with nature. They were said to be great with sustainable agriculture and just masters of living in harmony with the planet. So this is something that the Lyrins are credited with. And they are also often credited with giving Earth humans the gift of fire. So that is something that is often credited to the Lyrins as well. Now, as we mentioned earlier, the guides say that the Lyrins are no longer in physical form. So although we do still work with the Lyrins, they are still present. The guides say they tend to exist in the higher realms at this point, because of course, when we look at things from the perspective of linear time, the Lyran story happened a very long time ago. So when we talk about the physical Lyrins, they are not so much around, but the guides like to point out that all of the star races that we are more familiar with, their descendants, are actually descended from Lyra. Because really, all of us are. So a lot of times we are much more aware of the Lyran descendants. So the Sirians, the Orions, the Pleiadians, because as the guides like to say, all humans have Lyran genetics in them. Now, the only exception to this story that the guides always like to point out is the Arcturians. They say this is one of the only star races that we are aware of right now that did not descend from these original Lyran and Vegan colonies. According to the guides, the Arcturians came into the galaxy through their own origination process. But most of the other, if not all, of the other races that we are familiar with are descendants of these original Lyrans. So that is one of the reasons why it's so important for us to know about the Lyrans, because it's where the whole story starts. And once we start to understand more about some of their strengths and their weaknesses, we can see those things playing out in our human population. Because as we all know, we get both the good and the bad from our ancestors, and our star ancestors are no different. So that is why the Lyrans are such an important part of our story. It's because they're the first chapter. So I hope this has helped you understand our Lyran forefathers a little better. Let me know in the comments below what other star races you want to know about. Drop that in the comment box below. And while you're down there, don't forget, hit the subscribe button and the like button if you haven't done that yet. I'll see you soon. Bye.